Okay. Right. Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call for a motion for the acceptance of the minutes of the September 21st, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? No one. Motion carries. Public forum for this evening.
Nobody.
There is nobody for public forum this evening. We will move on to presentation. Welcome Dr. Charles Corey, District Superintendent for BOCES, and his crew that he brought with him tonight. Dr. Corey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and appreciate your time and indulgence this evening. With me tonight is my Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Jonah Shanker, and my Assistant Superintendent for Administration, Allison Dodd. So, and I'll introduce our other guests as well shortly.
Want me to put the light on?
Great. I think we're ready to go. Here tonight to talk to you about a project that really we started talking about probably 16 to 18 months ago, probably a little bit before that. And that's our capital project. The BOCES buildings are old and haven't had a whole lot of maintenance. And so we were all set to move forward with presentations to the county back in March of 2020. And then, of course, as you all remember, March 13th and then 16th of 2020 happened and everything kind of got put on hold. So now that we're back to some degree of normal schooling, we're back revisiting this particular project. Sure. Thank you. You can go to the next slide, Jonah. As you know, I think because of my other presentations here at the Ellenville Board, we're very proud of our programs and are very appreciative of the support that you have continued to show us over the past many years. But I wanted to preface this discussion tonight by simply saying what should be obvious. Our students are your students, and our buildings are your buildings. Next slide, John. A little bit of history. The last time Ulster BOCES did a capital project was 1989. And at that particular time, we were able to purchase the current CTE building, build the current special ed alternative school building on the Port Ewan site, and also build the current administrative building in New Paltz, as well as a garage. That particular site, particularly the Port Ewan site, had been leased for 10 years prior to that. It was a shirt factory, and there was no special ed building. The special ed students were educated about several miles up the road in an abandoned Grand Union supermarket. And at that point in time, the lease that BOCES entered into with for that particular property, the CTE, what is now the CTE building, was a 10-year lease with an option to purchase it at the end of 10 years for $2.5 million. They had to exercise that option by 1989. And as most of you know, when BOCES does, well, maybe you don't know because we haven't done it in such a long period of time. Anytime BOCES does a acquisition of new property, that requires a countywide vote. And so the vote was taken at that point in time. It was a two proposition question. Proposition 1, which was the purchase of the building, improving the building, and also constructing a 2-story wing on the special and alternative ed building. That was $13.25 million. And then Proposition 2, which was the construction of the administrative offices, the conference center, as well as a storage garage on the New Paltz campus, was $1.9 million. Total cost of the project was $15.232 million back in 1989. It was approved by a countywide vote. Countywide vote approved it by a 2-to-1 margin. That was the last major construction capital project done at Ulster BOCES, and so here we are today. So just to kind of put it and frame it in reference, next slide, Jonah. $15.232 million in 1989, adjusted for inflation, would equal $33.6 million today. Next slide, Jonah. Go on. So what we're proposing to do is not purchase new property, but in fact renovate our existing property. And under the laws of the state of New York, when a BOCES is renovating property, no new additions, it does not require a countywide vote. Instead, it requires an affirmative vote of the component school boards. And so that's why we're here today. This is a complicated project. Most of our school-based program renovations will have to be done during periods when students are not in attendance. Simply put, we're not like a typical school. Our Career Center, if you were to do a renovation project here at Ellenville High School, you would be able to move classrooms if you had space, move classrooms and relocate so that you could do construction on an ongoing basis. The nature of our classrooms are shops and labs. I can't simply move the welding lab down the hall. I can't simply move the auto shop down the hall. I can't simply move the cosmetology lab down the hall, and so on and so on. So the construction part of the renovation part of it has to be done when students are not present. And so therefore, the majority of the project will have to be done in times of school vacation periods and so on, thus shortening the construction window or the renovation window. When we think of that, we then think of how do we stage the project, and I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics.